What if you were to make a car out of aluminum or carbon fiber instead of steel? How would you know which one is better? How much it would cost to make? Where would you buy the materials from? Which kind of suppliers you would need to change? And how would you know the impact each alternative would have on the footprint of your product, on the materials extracted from the earth to make your product? 100% of the world's emissions come from products, the way they are made, the things we need for using them, and their end of life. And yet, less than 1% of all products have sustainability as a design parameter. That's what we discuss today. My guest today is Neil D'Souza. Neil is the founder and CEO of Makersite, a Stuttgart, Germany-based data and software technology company that builds supply chain digital twins to interrogate and improve products across multiple criteria, including cost, compliance, risk, and sustainability. In simple terms, Makersite customers are large manufacturing organizations, and Makersite collects and organizes the data about their supply chain to create a digital twin that simulates the impacts coming from making a product with one material instead of another, or with one supplier instead of another. Makersite recently raised an $18 million Series A, led by Hitachi Ventures and Translink Capital, with participation from KOMPAS and seed investor Planet A. With more than 15 years of experience in the sustainability space, building industry-leading products, Neil started Makersite in 2016. I hope you enjoy my discussion with Neil D'Souza. Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Nathan Pomart and this is Loose, the Climate Tech Podcast. Every week we interview a founder and explore the stories, ideas, innovations, and businesses behind some of the most inspiring climate tech companies that have a tangible positive impact on our planet. This show is designed to help you learn, instigate optimism, and inspire further action towards addressing the climate change challenge that we face as a global community. If you are an entrepreneur, business leader, or investor interested in learning more about the climate tech space and how you can play a part in it, this show is for you. So Neil, I'm very excited for this conversation. We're going to dive into how products that are around us every day are made and what can be done to make those in a more sustainable fashion using advances in AI and digital twins. So I expect this to be a fascinating discussion. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Nathan. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with you. Tell us about your story and how did you end up with Makersite?
It's a long story. I've been in this field for about 20 years. Through this time, I've worked with over 200 companies, helping them understand products. And if you think about it, the product is actually a supply chain. So what you end up doing is trying to figure out, what are the supply chains? What is stuff made of? And during these studies that I started my career as a consultant, right? So it was individual, one at a time, helping a customer, looking at their product and ending up with more or less the same thing. We all cook with water. Whether you're making a washing machine or a car, you end up with steel, right? And the problem you want to solve is how do you make a better product? And a better product is not just a more sustainable one, right? If it doesn't make sense financially, it doesn't work. If it doesn't make sense from a technical perspective, it also doesn't work. If you can't sell it in the jurisdiction that you want to be doing business in, it also doesn't work. And so evaluating the trade-offs that you need to make the sweetest and most successful product is where I spent a lot of time. I'm a technologist by background, so at one point I realized you don't want to be wasting your time doing the same thing again and again, which was actually how the world does it, right? And still does to a large degree. And that's why I created Makersite. It was just born out of frustration that we're doing it wrong in the history of if you just think of sustainability, right? Product sustainability analytics. One of the approaches to measure the performance of a product is to evaluate it across its life cycle. And it's called life cycle impact assessments or life cycle assessments. There have been about 150,000 assessments done in the history of this topic, which spans over 50 years. Just think about that. There are about 1 billion products on the market today. 150,000 of them have been assessed, and none of them have been changed. Right? It's just a report that tells you this is the status quo, and that's just not good enough. And that's what we set to change.
And so that's where you come in with an approach that combines the assessment, and you can tell us more about how you do it at scale, and combine that with um, a digital twin technology that enables you and your customers to make choices at the design stage, I imagine, that are going to have impact on the different dimensions you mentioned, sustainability and also the other one. So can you help us understand your solution and where it comes in to bring a different approach to the problem of product lifecycle assessments?
Hmm. I think the important thing to start with is who's it for? You know, life cycle assessments as a tool have been used by experts for experts, really. Um, there are not so many experts, and unfortunately, they don't have a lot of control over how a product is made or where you buy from. And I think if you look at what a company is its product, and a product is its supply chain. And if you think of these three bits, if you want to change a company, there are two engines that you need to affect. The first is the engine that makes products. That's the engineering and product development. And the second is procurement, which is who decides where you buy from. And so the first and foremost thing to consider when you're building something to help them is to know who you want to help. Right? It's these people. They're not experts. They're people that are good at what they do, but they're not experts in compliance or costing or sustainability measurement. But you still want to inform them of what is right and what is wrong and how to make a better decision, right? And so that's what we wanted to do. The first thing you realize when you understand that these are the people you want to solve is they have a certain way of working. They have a certain unit of operation. It's a component. It's an ingredient. It's a product. You know? They're nobody starts from atoms anymore. You start from components. You start from ingredients, and you put these together in smart ways. Helping them choose the right ingredients at the level that they buy, right? Just saying, well, hey, this is steel doesn't mean anything. There are 4,500 grades of steel that you can buy in the market today from 200 countries, right? Which one is it? And which one's better? And being able to quantify these multiple criteria at that level of granularity is what enables change. And the second aspect of this is these multiple criteria need to be evaluated not just in terms of what their what impacts they embody. Right? I'll give you an example. If you want to make a screw, right, to put a painting up on a wall, simple, make it out of steel, all good, no issues. It's a great material. But if you want to make that same screw to put a plane together, you should not make it out of steel because the biggest impact comes from taking that screw around the world. Right? And this very simple idea is influences many, many, many things. It influences the material you buy, where you buy from, what grade it is, how you manufacture it. Do you even need a screw in a plane? Right? These are the kind of considerations that you need to be able to enable within these organizations. And the third bit of this is if you ask procurement professionals, very often they have no idea what they're buying because they get a specification from engineering, and principally they go out in the market and try to find something that's best quality and at the cheapest price. But they don't know what's inside, and if you don't know what's inside, you don't know what is good. You don't know how to compare it, right? You can just compare on things that you know. And enabling communication between these two groups is crucial to solving that problem through all of our conversations. Um,
We'll get to we'll get in a second. I want to ask you about the impact that you think your solution can have on the sustainability. And we'll get there. Before that, can you tell us a bit about, you know, what type of companies are your customers, and what is the catalyst for them adopting your solution? Is it I want to become more sustainable, or is it I want to make my organization much more informed when it comes to product design decisions?
You have to think of what solution you're after, right? So there's three main solutions we apply our digital twins to, and the first, if you're looking at net zero, there are companies that just say, hey, we've made a commitment and we need to find a way to get there. There are not many, these are in the few thousands. There are millions of companies out there that have chosen not to do that. But this requires a certain way of operating, and you have companies like Microsoft and Procter and Gamble that are leaders in this field that are trying to create a better way of running their business. The second is competition, which drives the second major solution, which is product design. If you look at what Tesla did to the automotive sector, it's transformed it, right? And everybody is trying to chase now. And this has happened in almost every sector. And so the goal here is, how do you keep up with competition? How do you innovate faster? And how do you change the way you've been innovating over the last 30 years, which is this old stage gate process? Takes 5 to 7 years. Everybody's accustomed to this, but nobody has 5 to 7 years anymore. The automotive revolution has happened in the last 3 to 4 years already, and this is massive. So I think competition is the second, and the third is, if you look at what is happening with geopolitical issues around the world, with disruptions that happened on account of Corona. People have come to realize the globalized economy that we've built ourselves, we've done it at the cost of transparency and control, right? And most companies have suffered real pains over the last couple of years, and they've realized that this needs to change, and they're trying to unravel some of these supply chains and bring them closer. This transition from globalization to localization is happening, and it's inevitable. Whether you want to change or not, your supply chains are changing, and this is the third main driver for adopting these kind of technologies.
And just to close the loop on that, the customers that you work with, do they tend to be uh, big manufacturers in a wide set of industries, or can you give us a bit of a sense of the type of profiles that are a good fit?
So in general, when you want to solve a problem with software or with technology, it needs to be a complex problem, right? Otherwise, you don't need software for it. So these are usually massive companies. At this stage, I think this is where the biggest value is. It's in solving complexity, and so you find that there's two things you want to look at when you say, assuming these are large companies. The first is that company ready for this kind of technology? Not every company can leverage Makersite's tech, right? You need to have data in a certain way. You need to be mature enough. And I think the second is pressure, the external pressure that drives this kind of adoption. And we find that there are four sectors that are most appropriate to this kind of adoption at this point, which is the chemical sector, electronics and consumer goods, the automotives, and general manufacturing. But yes, we're fairly manufacturing heavy. So whenever you think of something physical, that's where Makersite comes in.
And what does it mean that they need to be mature in terms of their data uh, organization? What Because on your website you indicate that you plug into a lot of data sources within and outside of the organization. So it seems like you come into a pretty complex data ecosystem.
Yes. So it starts with a digital twin starts with a bill of material, and bill of materials are digital representations of products, right? So it's what engineers will eject out of their CAD drawing. This will be stored into a product lifecycle management system, and then transferred over to procurement at some point to say, hey, we need to buy these parts. But that bill of material is super critical to understand, well, what is this product? If you haven't got that sorted out correctly, you can't really automate the process of generating this digital twin either, right? So that's what I mean. And there are many industries or many industries and many companies within industries that even would be considered mature that don't have these kind of systems in place. They still work on Excel, and this is not something that's well suited for a sophisticated tool like Makersite, because it's a very complicated problem. There is no room for manual error, right? Our solutions are from end to end. There is no human intervention, right, with our solutions. And so that relies on a lot of automation, and that relies on a lot of data maturity within these organizations.
Got it. And coming back to the topic of the impact Makersite can have with improving our relationship with the planet. So even though it's not always the main driver for adoption, uh, when you see your customers adopting your solution, what kind of magnitude of improvement can they achieve with regards to the footprint of their products, before and after?
I think look at this, just zoom out for a second, right? If you think of what is creating impact in this world, right? There are many segmentations of this. Hey, we can look at industry and agriculture and energy production. It doesn't matter. In the end, 100% of impact comes from the products we make and use. Right? That's an epiphany that's very hard to digest, but everything comes from products we make and use. Um, we're in the business of trying to influence the creation of any of these products. So if you gave me a magic wand and said, Neil, from today you have access to influence all of the decisions that go into making 100% of the products. Today, I'd be able to give you 80% reductions, right, in environmental impact for the world. Now, realizing that takes some time, right? So if I tell you you should buy steel from here for your product and you should make that product out of paper rather than plastic, there isn't enough supply for this. But the supply chains as we see it today, you can pick any product and you can find 80% savings. This is phenomenal, right? This is massive, exactly. So the problem we have to solve is getting to those decisions, right? And that's what Makersite is focused on at the moment.
And I want to zoom in on the tier three reporting component of your solution. That's a sort of a notable hard problem when it comes to carbon emission accounting and so on. So how do you approach it, and what does your full scope three reporting solution do in order to help companies understand the embedded emissions in their supply chain?
Hmm. I think you have to. There's two important factors here. The first is the approaches to reporting Scope 3. Right? Scope 3 is a framework of how you disclose information. Um, there's two approaches to this. One is what is called activity based, which is you look at the individual actions that you perform during the operation of your business and allocate that into different buckets, and you get to your different scope 3 categories. The other is what is called a spend-based approach, which is an approximation. You say, well, I'm buying so many things in different criteria, in different categories. I'm buying some electronics, I'm buying some metals. They all have emission factors, and then you sum that up, and you get to more or less a couple of the categories that constitute scope 3. It's not all of the scope 3. The spend-based approach cannot cover everything like waste and stuff like that. But these are the two main things. And if you look at most of the vendors in the space in scope 3, they fall into the latter category because it's easier to do, right? The former approach is the only one that allows you to understand and influence impact. And if you think about what that means, if a company is a product and a product has a life cycle, if you unravel that cycle into a line, you actually get your scope 3 categories. And we're the only company in the world that has married this concept of life cycle analysis, which is how you design a better product, to the scope 3 reporting methodology of breaking that life cycle down into a different kind of buckets, right? A bucket system, right? And that's what makes us unique, because what you can do in reality is you can say, how will this particular screw, I love using the example of a screw because it's simple, everybody can imagine it. How will changing the design of this screw impact the overall scope 3 emissions of my company in 30 years? Right? And that's how change happens, right? You can talk about my scope 3 impact, but if you don't know what to change and how to change it, it's worthless. And that's what's fundamentally unique about how we deal with this. And this is that concept of digital twins that float about in your company that all add up to that final impact.
So zooming in again on the scope three topic, how do you get the information that is outside of your customers' data about their own suppliers to know what is the footprint of the component that comes into their solution?
Yeah, this is the $1 million question, right? The three main components to any kind of evaluation. The first is the definition of what you're consuming, the products you're making. The second is how does this represent in the global supply chain ecosystem, right? And the third is how do you marry these two? How do you say I'm buying steel and now I know what the supply chain of steel is? And this is what Makersite does. It sits on top of existing data. We've built the world's largest database that we've put together 140 different databases that look at multi-criteria views of supply chains. And we've built the world's only AI that allows you to marry these two things completely automatically. So you drop in a bill of material, the system automatically crunches out the digital twin and puts it into the context of these supply chains. And it does this in a supplier specific manner. So we don't think, if you think of carbon calculations, right, there's this, the typical thing is, just to simplify, I have a kilogram of steel and there's an emission factor associated with it. 2.2, right? And then you multiply the amount of steel you consume by that emission factor, and that's your impact. This is what is called a data set approach, right? I have a data set for steel. We don't have data sets on Makersite. We have supply chains. So you tell us I want steel and I want it with this grade and I want it from that location. And Makersite constructs from this database automatically a supply chain for that material you need. And this is how you get to supplier specific models of your products. Nobody else does.
Mind blowing. I'm just the number of entities in that model are increasing exponentially. Yes, yeah, and to help our audience understand, amongst those 140 data sources that you are integrating with, what are the big categories? What are the big categories of data sources?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So one of them is supply chain models, right? So this is how stuff is made. This is one big category. The second is when you sort that out, you have who is making it. These are manufacturing facilities and companies and the relationships that you have in between them. And then you have layers on top. So you say, what are the regulations associated with it? So there's databases for that. What are the environmental impacts associated with it? Other set of databases associated with that. How much are they making it and selling it for? Right, that's other databases for it. And then one level on top of that is the algorithms that you use to be able to view these different aspects of the digital twin. Yeah.
Okay. I think we could go on and dive really deep into this, but I want to move on and ask you a bit more about the business model and the prospects for the company. Maybe starting with the prospects. So you recently announced a Series A. Can you tell us a bit about what you intend to deploy that capital with? What is the next kind of set of milestones that you're aiming to reach as a company?
Mhm, mhm. I think it's important to understand where we got to, right? So, unlike very many startups in this space, we focused on building a product that works and building a company that can do that, deploy that product profitably. So we've been profitable for the last 2 years. We weren't looking for cash. We were looking for what is the fastest way we can scale. And that's a very unique position to be in our space, right? Many companies need cash. We needed support to scale. One of the things that we will be focusing is our strategy of partnerships. And as you might know, this is a very expensive affair to develop partnerships. And partnerships are categorized in three main buckets. The first is data partnerships that allow us to enrich this database that we've created. The second is implementation partnerships that help us deploy Makersite within customers. And the third is technology partnerships that allow us to scale, right? So partnerships like we've done with Autodesk and Barrow and others, where we're reaching customers where they currently are in the tools that they currently use. This is one big bucket. I think the second is staff. We're going to make a presence in the United States, and one of our investors is a specialist in this area, and that's why we chose them. And the third is we'll spend quite some time on building out the technology to scale where we need to get to. There's some features and functions and applications of Makersite that we've not tapped until now because we've been fairly focused. And this is where we'll be looking at growing.
Can you walk us through the life cycle of a partnership to help us understand this way of scaling for a company like yours selling into big complex organizations? Why do you need that, and how does that work?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think the it's the mission. You start with a mission, right? If you have 1 billion products you want to influence, you will not go about doing that selling subscription licenses to engineers and procurement managers, right? You need to connect to them in the tools that they currently use to make decisions, and that's the secret sauce to what we built. When we thought of how we would architect Makersite, we actually built it as an API first system, which is we first build APIs and then we build UI around it. You know, there's many functions that we have that we don't have that we don't have a UI for, because our vision was to say, how would this fit as an Intel Inside into the tools that are currently being used? So I think this is one key aspect of it. In terms of our enterprise accounts, we solve very complex problems, and this typically means changing processes of development and procurement as well. And so the kind of implementations, you don't just sell a tool, you implement a system, and therefore you need system implementers, right? And as a company, as a startup, this is not the most scalable leg of your business, right? And this is where we're looking at partners that do this for a living, that principally take our system and enable customers to be better by implementing Makersite. And I think that's the complexity of the kind of problem that we solve. We're trying to break it down into pieces where everybody has a part in it, because it's a big problem to solve.
And so now the challenge for you is education of the system implementers for them to be able to recommend and then implement your solution.
Correct. And then support them, right? That's partnerships are very difficult. Difficult to maintain meaningful partnerships that are also successful, and we plan to put some time and money behind that.
In terms of your revenue, you mentioned you're already profitable, which is, as you said, an exception in the land of startups. Um, how did you get there? What type of revenue model do you have that enabled you to reach profitability fairly quickly?
Mm-hmm. I think you just have to solve really hard problems, and you have to solve them for people that are screaming in pain. I think that's the secret to it, and I think the idea of so I'm based in Stuttgart. Stuttgart is notorious for these kind of businesses, right? We're very careful with our money, and so you always want to make sure that you're building a business that is sustainable. So the idea has always been, you solve a problem that a customer has, and you keep in mind that many customers will have this problem. So we co-innovated with some of our customers who funded quite a lot of the development of the system, right? And that's how you lower your reliance on external funding, but also you increase the product market fit. The time to product market fit is reduced tremendously when you do work like this. And this is how we managed to within 2 years reach profitability. This is amazing with growth, which is 4x. So that's phenomenal.
Were these customers that you had pre-existing relationships with at a personal level, or how did you find those initial customers willing to invest in you and in the co-development?
Hmm. So I'm fairly well known in the space, and so many of these customers knew me. But over 70% of our customers have come through recommendations of other customers, and that speaks a lot about the kind of tech that we deliver and the kind of service that we offer and the kind of problem that we solve and how we solve it. Right. So I think it started with a seed of very few customers that we said, hey, let's focus, let's make it work, let's make it great. The scale will come, and it did.
Let's wrap up, finish with the team. Um, what type of roles are you looking to hire, and what does it mean to join Makersite when you are an engineer or uh, marketing or salesperson? What kind of company culture are you joining? Do you need to be based in Stuttgart, or are you? Yeah.
I'll break that down into smaller bits, right? So we are currently 45 people, and we intend to be more than 100 in the next 12 months. That is quite an ambition. It would mean that a lot of the majority of our staff already is new, right? And the old guard is the minority now, and I think culture is a very plays a very crucial role at this stage of a company. It's three very simple things, and we think of it as a hierarchy. So um, there are three values, which is diversity. We believe in very diverse people coming together to observe and solve problems. And the more diversity you have, the better observations you will have, and therefore you will have a better solution. Right. The second is collaboration. We believe that we have a very interesting rule. We say if you're stuck for more than 20 minutes, you ask for help. And this breeds a certain kind of culture, right? Of I can rely on others, and others can rely on me. And I think purpose is something that brings us all together. It's very hard to motivate very different people who all work remotely um, to do to give 100% every day, and sometimes even 150%. And having that purpose, which I think is at the core of who we are, drives a lot of behavioral change within the company, right? And if you think of values, the next is you have certain kinds of behaviors, and then you've got culture. So you have what are they called? Um, it's it's norms, right? Things that you do, chores that you do. This 20-minute rule, for example, and each of these leads up to these values. And you find that we have a very simple framework for our culture, but it's extremely deeply ingrained with our teams. We want to be looking for talent. We're not looking for locations, so we're hiring all across Europe and North America at the moment. And if you go to our website, we're hiring across engineering, across sales, marketing, and service implementations. So it's across the board.
We'll put the link in the episode page for sure. Neil, I want to ask you the question I ask everyone at the end of the episode. Clearly, you're very experienced in the space, so you may have to scratch your head. But what is the main thing that surprised you since you started this journey with Makersite that you did not expect at the beginning? Can be positive or negative.
Hmm. I think this would be customer focused, right? We're delivering something that has been on the minds of experts in the field for the last 20 years. When I started this field, people were talking about a solution like Makersite. But it's always as if, this is something we need to have. This is something that someone
Yeah.
needs to build. And then we built it, and nobody believed us. And nobody believed us. And what's that in itself would not be such a problem, right? But the thing is, once they had the tool, very many people did not know
Mm.
what to do with it. The same people that talked about, the need for such tools that enable us to make better products, when they were given this tool, they didn't know how to implement it. And this was also an education that I think I didn't expect that. I expected people who envisaged what is needed would know what to do with it when they had it. But it's a great journey, right? It enables you to articulate exactly what the problem is and how to go about solving it within these organizations. I think that would be the most curious thing I noticed.
Fascinating. The gap between this vision of a perfect life-changing product and the actual steps of learning and changing your ways of working to be able to make the most out of it. So humans catching up with technology, it sounds. Neil, Neil, thank you so much. It's been fascinating to talk through your company with you. I love the approach of having an impact to literally one product at a time. It's very inspiring, and I look forward to following your journey and hopefully having you back on the show um, in a couple of months to hear how it's going.
Thank you so much, Nathan. It was a pleasure.
You can find out more about Makersite on their website, makersite.io. If you're inspired by their mission, check out their career page for their job openings. If you enjoyed the episode, follow us on your favorite podcast app and stay tuned for more insightful conversations with other inspiring climate tech founders.